So I would love to have a self-assured person working for me, but it only takes the right scenario and the loss of emotional intelligence for somebody to become, what's the word that's overdone? Arrogant. Do y'all see that? Have you ever worked with somebody who's arrogant? Say yes. It's just this little tweak, right? And then we've worked with people who are in retreat energy. You've trained them, you've tried to teach them, you've shadowed them, you've showed them, but they still kind of show up insecure. And this coaching tool helps you to sit down with that person. And what we learned in our coaching certificate is, put something in the middle sometimes, something between you and I, so our eyes can look down here for a second and I can make eye contact again. But I can say, when you were screaming at the servers from behind the line, it came off a little arrogant. Okay? When we needed somebody to greet people at the front door, although you're not technically a host, you said, oh, I can't do that. It's almost like you slipped into insecure, right? And then we have that coaching conversation where we give them feedback. Because everybody needs a Mr. Sansone who will say, you can do better, right? Myself included. So that is another tool for you. Turn the page. Now I want to talk about that career pathing, and the lifeline is on there for you now. And so when I think back over the trajectory of my life, there are really just two people that really cared about me in my career. Now I want you to think for yourself, during your whole career up to this point, how many people took a serious vested interest in your development? They sat you down, they coached you, they talked to you about your career path. So I'm going to tell you my second story. Now this was in property management. Now this is a very important segue because I was working with Sweetwater Properties last week doing this thing called the Vibrant Coaching Toolbox. And I was working with their regionals and their managers. And the VP came in for lunch to visit us. And so, of course, I sashayed over there to make a connection with her. And I said, you really have a great group of people in this room, great people. And she goes, oh, I know. And this is what she said. I quote, she goes, we've gotten 3 managers from the Roadhouse Steakhouse. See, we develop great people, don't we? And then people come by, sit in the station, and take them out of there. And so we've got to have a great career plan in place for these folks. We've got to take them through those learning curves so that they don't get picked up. Now, when I was coming up, I had Mr. Sansone, which is just the most wonderful person to work for the very first time. Taught me so many things. Taught me how to be a lady, and we all know the Ritz-Carlton thing, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. I mean, we were ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen at the Baskin-Robbins. Didn't even know it. But then Nancy Freeman came into my life. I was working at Applebee's and running the Applebee's, and Nancy Freeman called me over to the table, and she said, could you come here a minute? And I was like, sure. And I said, is everything okay? What can I do for you? All the things we say. And she says, here's my business card. Will you call me later? Okay, so how many of y'all have a business card you're handing out like crazy to every wonderful person you meet out in the world? You got to have a box of business cards in the car. And so I looked at the card. I was still very young. I was in my 20s, although I was running the thing. And she said, call me. I thought, what does this lady want? So I called her later, and she recruited me right out of there. Now, when I went to go work for her inside of her business, she made me a manager right out of the gate because I had been managing the Applebee's. This is a big mistake because these are 2 different businesses, and secondarily, I didn't really know anything about a profit and loss statement. I was putting the money in the bank, and somebody up higher than me was taking a look at how things were being run. Are y'all with me right now? She called me after about a month, and she said, I'm going to come to your office on Monday at 8 o'clock. And I said, okay. We didn't open till 9. I was very concerned, very worried. And she said, do you like Egg McMuffins? And I said, well, yes, I do. And she said, well, I'll bring you one. And I said, okay. So all weekend long, even though she said she'd bring an Egg McMuffin, was I worried about what was going to happen on Monday at 8 a.m.? Everybody say yes. I was very worried. I was like, this is not going to end well. And so she comes, and she sits down with me, and she ends up coming and spending like 10 Mondays with me, explaining this is revenue, this is expenses, this is the mortgage on the place, and here is the cash flow. And I said, why is it in red? And she said, because the financing on this property was not done well. And your job as a businesswoman is to get this thing in the black, or as close to it as you possibly can. So we need to save every penny and lease every apartment for the most expensive thing we can do. Doesn't that make perfect sense? But if she'd have told me, just reduce the expenses and raise the rents, and didn't explain to me how this whole business thing worked, would I have gotten it done for her? The answer is probably no. But we went to work, and we figured out a way to make that look better. So she introduced me to my future self, and here's the truth about meeting your future self, is you want people to get a vision of where they're going. So you've got to sit down with them and ask them, what do you really want to do with your career? Now, I'm going to tell you something right now. A lot of the people that work for you are like, what career? Like, you have to explain to them, no, you can get in this business. You can become a business person. You can put so many soft skills in your pocket. You can put the hard skills in your pocket. You can make a lot of money. But they don't understand that when they're fresh and they're green and they work for Mr. Sansone, not even when they work for Nancy Freeman. So we've got to take them through that. And if you look on your paper here, it says an introspective is what we need to come up with for them. We got to have them look at their life as that they get what they want as though they already have it, and it is in the future. They visit it with their imagination, and you allow them to allow their imagination to run wild. It is in great detail. It must be possible. Probability is not considered, and make it fantastic. Now, over the years, as I have developed people, I have had people say to me, well, I want to be the president. And you know what I say? Fantastic. Let's figure it out. Okay? So what would it be like to be the president of the organization? Okay, so they think fancy cars, big paychecks and all these things, corner office maybe. But here's the truth of the matter. There is a gap between where people want to go and where they are right now. And so you invite people to a retrospective. What do you think it's going to take to be the president? Well, I'm going to have to learn this. I'm going to have to learn that. I'm going to have to learn this. I'm going to have to learn that. I'm going to have to get a college degree. I'm going to have to go to culinary school. I'm going to have to do whatever. Now, immediately when you do that, you are helping them develop their future state. And here's the truth of the matter. An employee's future state is your future state. The more developed your people are, the easier it is to run this thing. The more skills people have, the moment you can take over a particular location, or you could build, you've got somebody ready to go. Now, here's the thing about a retrospective. If you look at your paper, it says you look back to the present, considering every step you ever took to get to the introspective. Now, Edwin Waytiel was a poet, and he said, no path is ever truly trod unless it's trod both ways. And here's the thing. If I sit down with somebody and I say, you want to be the president? Every time I sit down with them, I remind them of what they said. They could even say, I was just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding. I'm going to get you to president. You ready? So we figure out all the steps, and I hold him accountable. I give him or her feedback about the progress that they're making and support them on their way, because they have to go out and think it up, and then they got to think about what it takes. Now, how many of y'all have ever wanted a brand new car? Like, you had your sights set on a particular brand, a particular color, a particular thing. Anybody ever have this in your life? All right. Now, the day you figure out what you want, you go out for a ride. What do you see everywhere you go? That particular car, that particular style, that particular color. I see it's the same thing with our careers. If our people don't understand what's possible, we don't have that conversation about career pathing, we don't talk to them about what's possible, they won't see the opportunities that are out there. And are there opportunities like crazy in hospitality to get your career on the right path? The answer is yes, right? So finally, when people come back and they have their introspective and their retrospective put together, they get a prospective. They get propelled forward. Now, here's the thing. I have sat down with people. I have helped them career paths. And I said, here's what we're going to do. What do you think? What are the things it takes? We figure out the gaps. And then they will look at me like this. It's the same thing as looking at yourself in the morning going, can I do this? Is this all I've got to work with? But here is the thing. They'll say, how do you know this will work? Now, can I promise any employee the future that we've dreamed up? Can I promise anybody that it will happen? I can't promise it because they have to do the what? They have to do the work. But here's what I tell them. I say, doing trumps knowing. And that's one of the absolute truths in this life. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but here's what I do know. If I try today, it's more likely it'll happen tomorrow. And so it's this thing of effort that we've got to put out there. And so that is next right steps, is getting people to career path. What are their next right steps? And what I will end with is this. Inside of every employee and inside of you are 6 energies. We're on the E, energy, in my SHINE coaching methodology. So the energy inside of a human being is not singular, but there are actually 6 energies. And I just want you to think about that for a second. Inside of you, you have an intellectual energy. And the question there is, what do you need to learn? What do you need to know to do your job? So both Mr. Sansone and Nancy Freeman sat me down and taught me what I needed to know, how things worked, and gave me the keys, the literal key and the keys to being a businesswoman. I mean, I didn't get my college degree done until I was 42 and had a wonderful career before that. The only reason I went to school is because I thought, my children are going to college, let's all compare report cards, right? And so I went to school when they went to school, all right? But I had a wonderful career without that, but I can figure out what I need to know from the people around me if they're willing to teach me. The next energy is emotional energy. And here's what I know about this business. You gotta love it. Am I right? You gotta love it. You're up early, you're up late, you're working the weekends, you're doing all the things. And so it is really all about love. And you've got to have this heart for people. You want to see them better when you're done with them than when you first found them. And really emotional energy, emotional intelligence is huge. So that's the second energy. The third energy is spiritual. And I'm not talking about religion here. What I'm talking about is this enthusiasm for the work that you're doing. And so, there's this natural energy that comes out of somebody who's enthusiastic. In fact, the word enthusiastic means like in Godism, right? The word enthuse means God. And so it's just in you that you've got this spirited nature that makes things better, that makes things happier wherever you go. You light up the room when you come in and you shine. The next thing on here is your social energy, and this is so important. So here's what I know for a fact too, is when I worked for Nancy Freeman in the property management business for all those years, it was about 15 years, I was working for her, she would consistently say to me, who do you know who would want to be in this business? Now here's the thing. I think eagles flock together and turkeys flock together. How many of y'all would agree that that is true? I mean, and she knew that probably the people that I hung out with, the people that I had social energy with, would be great recruits. Many of my friends came to work for Summit Properties, and we grew the whole thing. We had a great group of eagles that worked there. And then the final energy is financial energy. And so I'll end with this quick story. So when I first got my first job serving tables, I was in a nice restaurant, and I would sit at the back table at the end of the night. Does anybody remember taking your apron off and emptying your pockets onto the table in the employee break room? Does anybody remember doing this? Okay, and so you would count out your money and you would stack your quarters and your stuff and your thing. Does everybody remember doing this? Okay, I'm still doing this, I'm sure, right? And so I had all my stuff lined up. There'd be this one guy, and he'd have way more money than me. And I would be like, how do you do it? How do you make we were like, my station was next to your station. How did you make like so much more than me? He goes, well, you got to work the ticket. And I'm like, what do you mean work the ticket? He's like, well, are you upselling? Are you suggesting the most expensive bottle of wine? And I said, no. You see, I was in a retreat. Remember the retreat, the towards, and the over against? I was like, I don't want to be pushy. And so, I thought, well, I'm going to watch him the next shift. So he's constantly upselling, constantly asking if they want extra this, extra that, bottle of wine, champagne with this, that, and the other thing, and dessert. And so here's the thing. Is there untapped financial energy that your people could be making without you even worrying about what's in their paycheck? I mean, if we just get them trained, take them through the career path, there's ways that they can do that. But of course, people want to be paid a fair wage. So when you think about energizing your people, it's not just about the energy, the financial energy, it's about all 6 of them. And I don't know about you, but I stayed with Summit Properties for 15 years and had a wonderful, wonderful career. So I think it's so important for us to go get what we really want. My husband is a salesperson, and so he's a very good guy, earth guy, and solid, and a sales guy. He won a trip to Puerto Vallarta from his sales. And so I had never been to Puerto Vallarta before. How many people have been to this really lovely place? It's really gorgeous. And so we went down there, and at this time, my children were like 8 years old and 12 years old. And so we go down to Puerto Vallarta. It was during the Easter holiday, spring break, right? And the doors are open. My husband's a good old boy from Wilkes County, and he's like, Sunday, we're going to go to church. I said, okay. So we all get up, we get all dressed up, and we get in the taxi, and we're going to go. And when we get in the taxi, I know this much Spanish, and I said to the taxi driver, I said, Iglesia, por favor. And he said, no problema. So I turned to my husband, I said, he said no problem. And David goes, I know. So we're driving along, and in my mind, I had dreamed up this church was going to be like this big stone building with stained glass windows and everything. And when we got there, there was like a cinder block wall, and the guy pulled up, and he's like, this is the church, Iglesia. And I was like, doesn't look like an iglesia. He's like, go around the wall, go around the wall. So we go around the wall, and there's a sea of those white chairs. You know those white chairs you buy at the Walmart every summer? You get 4. They're like $20 a piece. Lasts about 1 season. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? And they all say Corona Light on the back of them. And my son, who's the oldest, says, now this is church, And so we go in, we sit down in the Corona Light chairs, and before you know it, this little lady comes in, and she's got her daughter with her, and down in Mexico, I mean, Easter is a whole thing. Like, everybody dresses to the nines, and the ladies down there take super care to dress up their baby girls. And so this little girl comes in, and she's adorable. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to understand a thing that said, in fact, I'm going to focus on this beautiful little girl in front of me. Now, as people were filing in to the church, the mother would point at the daughter, and the daughter would be like this, showing off her outfit. She's got, bows and ribbons and lace, and she's gorgeous. All right? And so I'm just falling in love with this little girl. Well, before you know it, a mariachi band comes out, and is playing the music, and I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. What a celebration. And the priest comes out right behind the mariachi band, and he's got this bowl of water, and he's got this paddle, and he's dipping the paddle into the water and flicking it all over the people in the congregation. And I'm like, what is he doing? Oh, that's a blessing. That is a blessing. That is what that is. And so he's walking around, and, as he's coming our direction, I look at my little girlfriend here, and she's thinking the same thing I'm thinking. We're both like, lean in, get some of that stuff. And so the priest comes by, does his paddle. I get a little sprinkle. I'm good. Well, The little girl in front of me obviously did not feel the sprinkle. She turns to her mother, pulls on her mother's dress, and in Spanish says something like this, "I didn't get any." And the mother looked at her and in Spanish says, "Don't you worry about it." But before the mother knew it, the little girl was out the corona chairs and up to the front where the priest was just about to put down his bowl of water. And she looked at him and said, "A me, a me, a me," which means at me, at me, at me. That priest looked at her, got this big smile on his face, turned around, picked his bowl back up, and proceeded to douse her pretty dang good. And she's just sitting there going, "I got it." Because, see, that's what she really wanted, and that's where I started. I mean, what do you really want? For your business, for your career, for the people that work for you? It's out there. We just got to go down front and say, "This is what I want." And that's my challenge to you. Figure out what you want in your business. Use some of these tools I've provided. My name is Nicole Greer, and it has been a pleasure to provide you with things from the Vibrant Coaching Toolbox. Thank you.